starting on a really positive note, the author is available to meet us next week, which I think is really exciting. She's going to meet us on Tuesday, June. My calendar. Tuned the 7th at our regular time of 1 p.m. So she'll meet us on here then. So if you want to come with any questions or thoughts you have on the book, she's really excited to meet us and talk over our thoughts on the book and anything else we want to share or ask. But here we are, the last 3 chapters of the book. I did not get a chance to read them thoroughly, but I was just talking to Kristen briefly before, and she said this is kind of like the easiest part of the book, not as much meat as it's been so far, but still really good and applicable. So one of my first questions for today was, bring it up. Oh, here we go. Okay. The first question is, when it comes to giving, keeping this Sunday's lesson in mind, what you have planned for Sunday, how can you help facilitate a parent's conversation with their kids? So your lesson this Sunday, how are you going to help facilitate a parent's conversation with their kids?
So this Sunday we start our series on Pentecost. And so I have I don't even know what it's called. It's like Bible Stories Made Easy for Kids or something. And it breaks down every Bible story, and it's like a handbook, and it has like questions and answers. And so in my study of Pentecost, it said, who is Holy Spirit? And so it gave like descriptions on how to explain him to kids and how he is part of the Trinity, and with biblical references for that. So I thought, you know what, that would actually be really cool, is to break a different one down for every few days and just say, who is Holy Spirit? And then post that or share it, and then give the parents kind of the words to say, and going back to like giving them the tools, and just really helping them navigate sharing that with their kids, and then helping them share their testimony with how they're going to, or how they've seen God work in their life.
That's a good thing to teach. Holy Spirit's not often taught. I think that's really, really good to teach kids that, something that they're growing up in. This Sunday, we're talking about about King Saul. There we go. I had to think about it for a second. And how Israel demanded a king, and God gave them this man, and we're going to learn about the fall of King Saul eventually. But with our curriculum, they give out these emails you can send to parents that have really good Christ connections that parents can share with their kids, and then kind of like talk more about it on their own. But for like example, this week, we're talking about how the Israelites did not trust God. They wanted a king. God gave them a king, but he had a plan to send his son Jesus to be the king over the world. Jesus would be the perfect king, and Jesus would bring peace and to save people from their sin. So that's like one of the Christ connections that our parents are going to be using and saying to their kids. But to make it simple and sweet, we have a big picture question and answer that's the same for the entire month. So this really helps it drive home for our kids every week. And it's, why does sin separate us from God? And the parents give the answer, because God is holy. So that's one way we're kind of partnering with our parents and giving them things to say to their kids to disciple them at home.
What curriculum are you using?
That is Gospel Project.
Okay.
And it's like a 3-year-long chronological study. You spend a lot of time in the Old Testament. But it's been good. It was an adjustment for us, but our kids are really they're doing better on this than they were before. before it was more like a thematic study. And now that it's more Bible chronological Bible stories, with some application, our kids are thriving better on it. So they really like it and retaining it well.
How do your
What did you
parents-
switch from? Sorry.
Orange.
Okay.
I love
Um,
orange, but they are going down a path like our church doesn't necessarily agree with. More I don't want to offend anyone if they use orange, because I still love orange, but they're just seeming to be more in the middle versus taking a stand in a belief, if that makes sense. They're kind of being like in the middle ground for all religions to use.
How do your parents like Gospel Project?
They love it. They were the ones that pushed for it. I still, although they pushed for it, I still don't see a lot of like parents doing things during the week. And because of this, and that's why I wanted to read this book, was trying to help parents to do that. I have one parent who I know uses my weekly emails. Like, she asks for them if I don't send them out. But our parents love that their kids are knowing the Bible stories and how that Jesus is the center of the whole story of the whole Bible. That's the focus that's repeated every single week. So it's really good. I like it. And I was just working on my script this week for it. So what do you guys use? And do they give you any resources like to make this connection that we're talking about, like to facilitate conversations, or, giving them skills to help at home?
We use Bible Studies for Life,
Mhm.
but which is also Lifeway. But I've been looking for something else for a while. We used the Gospel Project for a little while. We used somebody else's donated curriculum, and they just gave us like a set of 3 years.
Mhm.
And I liked it better because as a kid, I stored a lot of Bible stories in the same place as fairy tales in my brain, just because of how they were told as such an individual. Like, Noah's Ark to me is such an example of something that, like, I still struggle with, like, remembering that it's a true story from the Bible versus a kid's story like Cinderella or Pinocchio. And I think it's because I was always told it, like, there was never a through line of like, here's where Noah's Ark lies in the history. So to me, it wasn't history. So I personally really liked using the Gospel Project because it pushed a little bit more of that, like, here's the history of the Bible, here's how it connects, here's how it goes to the next thing, and realizing that Jesus's birth is not on the first page like a lot of kids assume it would be.
Yeah. And with it too, they don't just share like the happiness, like the happy things,
Yeah.
With Noah's Ark, they emphasize the fact that it happened because of sin. It wasn't
Yeah.
all about animals and rainbows, which I kind of grew up under that mindset too. Like, oh, look at this Noah's Ark, he saved, and with this, you make kids realize it's because of sin. It wasn't just a happy, save the animals green movement. It was a sad thing.
Yeah. I don't feel like our curriculum has great parenting resources. What I was going to say earlier is my answer to the question about what am I going to do this Sunday is that I'm probably too overwhelmed at the moment. The past 2 weeks, I'm like in the middle of dealing with like the 4th ER visit between some various families. So just trying to get through all those things. I think I've talked about this before, of like feeling a little overwhelmed with whatever they provide. A lot of it assumes a lot of prior things that my parents aren't doing yet. So it feels like even the stuff they provide, I would have to edit and create and change for it to be usable, which is overwhelming to me.
I would agree. I feel that we used Bible Studies for Life for a very short period of time because it didn't click with our families. And this has, but I feel like it's because and our parents have told us they feel like their kids are already super knowledgeable of a lot of things. So if it fits them. But if you're a new Christian or not a new believer, I think it is more difficult to understand and to do. I don't think it's user friendly
Yeah.
for a new believer or a seeker. What do you use, Jackie?
I write my curriculum.
Mhm.
And I wrote it because I was not raised in church. And I was a junior when I got saved. And after I got saved, I was like legitimately like angry because I was invited to church a lot, but nobody could tell me what made me a sinner when I thought I was a good person.
Mhm.
And so I, was like, this isn't right. And so by the time I graduated high school, I led well over 100 people to the Lord. And then when I had kids, I was like, this is going to be amazing. And my kids at like 2 and 3 were having like neighbor kids over, except like leading them to Christ. And I was like, this is going to be the best thing ever when they're in church. And then I saw what our church was using for curriculum. And I was like, this is why all my friends could not tell me why I needed a savior. This was why my parents stayed out of church. This is, so it was just, I kind of became very angry with the curriculum options that were out there. So I started writing my own, and now I kind of like provide it to whoever, just because I do write it from the perspective of how do you explain this to someone who has no idea of the gospel or who Jesus is or why they need a savior or what makes them a sinner. And so all of our resources I create too, because it's all on me. And we do, and again, everything starts out with, the parent that is brand new to church, and we work our way up to the parents that were raised in church and know all the adventures. We call them Bible adventures instead of Bible stories, for that same reason of differentiating between fairy tale and real life. And so that is what we use. And I'm kind of being pushed by different people to go official with it. So I'm working on a website and stuff right now. And I actually have an interview next week to be like the main curriculum provider for the whole Pacific Northwest for our denomination. So I'm kind of scared.
That's wonderful. And
Well,
what's great is, your kids, your community, you've experienced, what you have, and God's given you a gift to create something that's beneficial for your families. I think that's super important, because we don't all fit, we're not all cookie cutter.
Mhm.
We're all different communities, different lifestyles. And I don't mean like, I mean like
Right.
our areas are very different. So I think that's awesome that you're given that opportunity to do that. We'll have to pray for you that it goes well. When's that interview?
On the 15th.
Okay.
So it's coming up quick.
Awesome.
So
Really great. I think it's very important to make sure what you're using is or can be seeker friendly. That's why I also edit my stuff. Like, you got to make sure it's readable and doable and approachable for anyone, because you don't want ever people to feel shut out or people to feel left out or like, I don't know this stuff, so I'm not going to do it.
right.
And I feel it's what, Rachel was saying here in her book, is you want to give parents those tools that they need, so that they can disciple their kids.
Yeah. And Hannah, if it would make life easier for you, I would be more than happy to email this stuff over to you and just have that be a blessing to you and to your ministry, if it would give you time.
What kinds of, so is it like a whole curriculum? I definitely be
Yes,
interested in checking it out.
it is. It's everything. Like I do monthly trainings with all of the other churches that use it. It has it's a whole discipleship model. It's got the curriculum for infants all the way through adults. It's got the parent resources, church resources, the whole nine. I'll message me your email address and I'll send you some stuff.
Okay, do you have I mean, I don't want you to, I don't know that I can switch. I'd have to talk with like our head pastor and stuff like that. So don't spend,
Right.
I'd love to see like a sample, but whatever that
Yeah.
looks like.
Yeah, I have a curriculum preview that I can send you,
Okay, that'd be great.
Awesome.
which I guess if anybody else wants to look at it too, I'll just email it to whoever wants it.
That's sweet of you, Jackie. Thank you. You've got good stuff. I love the ideas you've shared over the past, 4 months I've gotten to know you. I still talk about your, and I've talked about it when you weren't here and 2 weeks ago, is the multi-generational thing you do. I absolutely love it.
Oh,
Your thing in service,
the celebration team.
yeah.
Yes.
So the next question was, when it comes to giving parents skills, how can we help them not feel like it's their first time at the gym? I was kind of using her correlation of her first experience at a gym. So how can we give them the skills so they don't feel like a chicken with their head cut off?
Again, I think that just goes back to making it simple. Like, you said Gospel Project has the one question that they ask every month. I do the same thing. I think a lot of parents are busy and they're overwhelmed. And so anything that we can do that just makes Jesus tangible and invites them into everyday moments, and where we can tell our parents, you know what, it's okay to say you don't know the answer, and say that you trust God to reveal the answer to you. But just really bringing it down, really making it simple, and kind of working on steps, like here's the I've never been to church before in my life answer, and here's the more deeper theological answer when your 4-year-old is writing worship songs and wants to know like what open the floodgates of heaven means or something. Like I think it's going to look different for every phase of life.
Yeah, I'd agree. Keeping it simple, because as a parent, I'm overwhelmed. I'm thankful that school is coming to an end just so we can get a break from all the school stuff and all the meetings and activities they do. And like parents nowadays, it's parenting is different than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It's just a whole different generation. So I think keeping it simple is good. And I think it also gives them confidence over time of, okay, I'm saying this one phrase over and over and over. How can I add to that as a parent? What's my life experience? And I think telling parents that too is sharing stories, sharing what they've experienced is huge, because it makes them more realistic to their kids. Like they don't look at their parents as like, oh, they don't understand, when in reality they may understand.
Yeah, and I think that's the hard thing too, is that I feel like there's been a lot of pressure as parents. I'm a homeschool parent, so but I was also a teacher, and there's so much pressure from okay, I'll get you breakfast in just a second. But I feel like there's a lot of pressure from like the school district, like, here, just let us handle it, we're the professionals. And so and even in a lot of curriculum, it's like, here, just let us handle it, we're the church, we're the professionals. And so parents are just so used to like, here, just take my kids.
Yeah.
That when we just even make parenting exciting and just kind of cast that vision, going back to the Disney book, just casting that vision of like, you are the biggest influence that you have, or in your kids' life, and you can make a difference. And just kind of motivating them to be like, no, I don't have to be a professional, I can be a hot mess, and God can still use me.
Yeah, I think in the world of social media too, it just feels overwhelming. Like you think you have to do all these things, and we don't. I think new parents or parents who may be struggling, they need to know and understand that all it takes is love and building a relationship with your kid. That's what's going to make Jesus real. It's not going to be knowing every answer. It's not going to be knowing all the things or doing all the things, but our relationship with our kids is what's going to show the best example of Jesus. I think that's the biggest and easiest skill to share with our families. Don't worry about Instagram and all those perfect moms. Those are filters.
Convincing
So
moms that
true.
other people don't have it together.
No.
I was talking with a mom this week. I was like, they don't have it together. They look like it. I promise you. I can't tell you everything, but I promise you.
Yeah.
Other people are going through it.
Yeah. You don't see in those perfect pictures the kids screaming in the background or, pulling on the leg of the person taking the picture. Like, no one's kitchen looks like that. Like, it is just, those are unobtainable, not reality. It's not real life. And it is, I think it's been a huge detriment. I mean, it's been an influence on me. There's so many times I'm like, oh my goodness, I wish I could do that with my kids. And then I'm like, wait a minute, that is just such a setup. Like, it is not real, So I think just making it simple, honing in on the best skill you can have as a parent is a relationship with your child, loving them. That is how you do it. Do you have a lot of families in your church, Jackie? Like, a lot that are searching for ways to be better parents or, searching for those resources to help them at home?
Well, this is what's interesting is that our church is, we came to our church a few years ago, and it was known as like the meat grinder church. And it was basically the church that you went to if you wanted to be eaten alive by the congregation.
Oh my.
Yeah. So we had a lot of people that were like, no, you don't want to go to that church, but they just got a new pastor a few years prior that we knew. And they were looking for somebody on worship, and they were looking for a children's ministry director. And it's in my hometown. So it was like, we're just going to do this because my husband does worship music.
Okay.
And so we went, and we found that at the time it was like a church of about 15 people.
Oh my goodness. 15
yes,
people had that big of an
15
effect.
people. And there were 2 kids, and now it's a church of about 40.
Okay.
And I have about 24 in kids church.
That's great.
So it's been interesting because most of our congregation most of the kids come with their grandparents.
Okay.
And so we've had to find ways to engage with the parents and like, try to motivate the parents to be parents while they were not in the picture. So we kind of have like all of our games use the same or similar materials to the Beat That game. So it's like chopsticks and cotton balls, Dixie cups, or not Dixie cups, plastic cups. And so we just played those games, and we gave every family a game kit. And we started telling the parents, hey, just, telling the kids, sorry, my daughter, here, play these games with your parents and see, and here's like some different ways to do it. And it's actually allowed us to connect. I want to do the bowl. Okay, you get the bowl. 4. It's tough to be 4. But we.
Yeah, you got to get the right color, Mom.
Yeah, right color, right. Yeah. So anyway, we now have parents who don't even go to our church who are interacting on our Facebook posts and with their kids, so that way they can get like family challenge points. And they come to all of, like, if we have a family event, they will come because their kids want them to come because they know that there's something in it for the parents. And so we're trying to create like play dates and just meeting the parents where they are in the community, and just not even include church in all of that right now, and just love them and hopefully make the connection that as they see more and more people and they make the connection, oh, hey, they go to that church and they go to that church and they go to that church, then maybe that will get them to come.
That's great. Hannah, we just got a tour of your church.
Huh?
Yeah, I have one of my moms is currently in the ER with her littlest daughter, so I'm watching the older one.
Oh,
So
Very.
She needed instructions. Well, she really just needed me to say that it was okay for her to take a break on a job that I'd given her.
Oh, ministry, there's no like one set job description. It is so broad.
Yeah, that's how it feels this week.
Yeah. Well, I'll keep your family in mind too as I pray, the family in your church there. And the next question was, with families who are on the fringe, like the outskirts, kind of like you kind of answered this question, Jackie, but what is your plan of action in reaching them? So those parents on the outskirts who just send their kids to church, to be at church, and they just stay home, or they go get coffee or go to a restaurant. How are we, what is your action plan in reaching them?
Right now, our church is really lucky that our fringe, I wouldn't have defined it our fringe this way. At first, I was like, oh, I'm excited for this chapter because it feels like all our families are on some kind of fringe. But we run like a bus ministry for kids, but we pick up the whole family. We don't pick up any kids at all without parents, which has been really great. And through that, we have like one of the parents knows other parents and has invited them as well. And so of course that's adds a lot of layers of difficulty because you're dealing with adults, and the parents who just would normally put their kids on the bus and say like, put on some shoes and go to church. We also have to wait, and maybe they're not ready when it's time to go. But that's been it's been really cool to watch that, because when I first started this job, well, I transitioned from a layperson to a full-time minister. And so I'd been on the search committee. It doesn't matter. Anyways, I and the rest of the church, when I started this job, did not want us to have a bus ministry, because we just had a huge vision for family ministry, and we didn't want to end up having kids that we didn't get a chance to speak truth into their parents' lives. And so as we've slowly added this bus ministry, it's been cool to see it be different than what I thought it would be, that we're picking up whole families and that the parents are coming with them. And right now we don't really like allow, I guess is the best word, kids to come without their parents being at church as well.
That's really cool. And the fact that you have parents coming is even better. I mean, I ran bus ministries for a long time at a previous church. And I mean, I'd get 64 kids to come to church, but parents would never be interested in coming. So that's awesome that you guys are doing that. And I mean, like you said, the one mom invited other people, and I mean, the word of your church and its ministries are spreading,
Yeah.
The church that I was saved in did extensive research on just Barnard type research, just as far as what church culture is like in our community, because we live in Washington, and Washington is one of the most unchurched states in the nation. And so it is very, very, very difficult to get anybody to come to church. And we even live in the more conservative part of the state. But what they found is that it took anywhere between 7 and 18 points of contact with someone within the church before anyone would consider coming to church. And what they considered a point of contact was an encounter at the grocery store, or an encounter at McDonald's, or whatever. And so what they ended up doing is they created these cell groups that were basically evangelism based small groups that didn't talk about the Bible. So we're just going to show up. We're going to have block parties. I'm going to invite you over for a barbecue. We're going to take our kids to McDonald's and hang out and play, that kind of thing. And they would always invite people in their target list. So people that you're praying for, that you want to see come to know Jesus, and you want to see them come to church, you would invite them to all of these different cell groups, and you would at least be involved in 2 or 3 different ones. So anytime you host a barbecue, you invite Johnny, your neighbor, to come. So then Susie's hosting a barbecue. So you again invite Johnny to go to Susie's barbecue because they've already met Susie at your barbecue. And then, Amy has a barbecue as well. So then you invite them to, or they invite you to McDonald's or whatever. So you have like this network of people where you're constantly inviting people to church or to events outside of church where you don't talk about church, but then you make it known that, oh, hey, yeah, this is how I know so and so. And so it's like networking basically. And that was the most effective way that they found to bring new families into the church, was by creating these like networking cells within the church out in the community. So that way you're always networking people back. And then, then they see, oh, well, Johnny's always super, or Johnny was the non-Christian. Hold on. Susie, who I met through, you, because you invite them to all these things. They're always so nice. And every time they see me in public, they're always so happy to see me. What makes them different, and they're just like Amy, who's also really always really happy to see me. And so just always making church the common denominator between the relationships with all these different people. That was a really long, complicated way to say that is what they found was the most efficient and effective way to bring new families into the church, as far as all of the networking and all of that.
I completely agree. I think relationships are key for those fringe families or even for new potential families. Hannah and I had talked offline one time, and my church, we recently read this book. Let's see if it's here. It's called When Helping Hurts. It's more when your church is trying to take a community outreach approach, and how not to be like the handout church, because you're not helping anyone by that, right? It's truly relational based, talking about getting to know people on a personal level, and not just hey, come in and get a McDonald's gift card, or hey, come in and get a grocery gift card. It's, hey, what's going on, and how can we really help you get out of this cycle of brokenness, or how can we get you out of this cycle of struggle? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? So the focus is truly on relationships. And this upcoming month, we're preparing for Backyard VBS. And we're taking this approach because we want to reach the unchurched families, or we want to reach families who are like interested in church but don't know where to start, and one of my host families just told me the other day, she put her lawn sign up and it says, we're hosting Backyard VBS. And she's like, he's my new neighbor. He came over and was like, hey, so do you go to church? And she's like, yeah, he's like, yeah, I saw your VBS sign. I when I was a kid, I went to church all the time. And, I've been thinking about going again. And like, it's this conversation starting, and now she's building a relationship with these neighbors. And that's, I truly think that's the most successful approach, because you're making people feel valued. You're making people feel like they have worth, that they're not just another person walking into your church, And with our Backyard VBS 2, we are the last day, we're having a big celebration party at the church. So we're inviting all these families to come, and it's just going to be like a community event, like there's going to be bounce houses and food and fellowship. Like we're again furthering the relationships we're making with these people and the neighbors with one another. And it's just, we have found it's been really successful, and we've had families return to church because of it. I'd say like we've had on average 2 or 3 new families a year after VBS because of this approach. And it's really exciting to see that work. And we know it is successful because it's intentional. It's not just, oh, whatever, we got their kids. It's truly making an effort to get to know them. I think it's the same when you're trying to tell someone about Jesus. You can't just stand on a corner and preach at them that they're dying and going to hell. Like that's such a turnoff. But when you are investing in someone and loving on them, just like Jesus did, it makes a huge, huge difference. Oh, and to add, we the Sunday after VBS. So our VBS is Monday through Thursday, celebration on Friday, and then that Sunday, our kids are taking over the service, and they get to lead the congregation in worship. And that's kind of another way we pull those parents in that are on the fringe, because parents love to come and see their kids, sing on stage and do stuff. And our church is, and it's a culture we've created, but like we are so family oriented. I mean, you literally can't walk through our doors with it getting like stopped by 3 different people. Hi, welcome. Like our church is just really amazing at that, making you feel welcome and not fake either. Like, oh, thanks for coming. And then they turn around and walk away. Like our people are really good in just investing in the people that walk through our doors.
That's amazing. I've always loved the idea of backyard VBS, but I wasn't raised in church. So I didn't even know what VBS really looked like because I was never allowed to go. And so then it was like, I attempted my first VBS and it was like, you know what, this would be really cool to like take it to the people. So I might be tapping into, hey, Jody, come help me.
I can hook you up. We've been doing it for 3 years now, 4, 3 or 4, 3. And it's work, but it's so worth it because you're like, we were hosting VBS here and we'd get 80 kids, but they were all of our kids, or maybe a few neighborhood. Like we just never reached who we really wanted to reach. And I was like, I need to change this because I'm not reaching who God wants us to reach. And once we put it in people's backyards, our first year we had 120 kids like attending all different days. I think last year we were up to 160 like total different kids that attended VBS by the end of the week. And like my celebration party, we had like torrential downpours here in Michigan for like a month straight, except the week of VBS. It was amazing until that Friday. So we had to move 2 large bounce houses inside our church and serve food. It was crazy, but people left going, oh my word, this was so much fun. Like it just created a whole different atmosphere. But it's awesome. And when you have people in your church that really embrace it, and you'll be surprised how many people are interested in it because they're like, oh, I can do that for my neighbors. It's really, really cool. So
on the topic of backyard VBS, I don't know if they exist in the States. I'm assuming they do. It's Child Evangelism Fellowship. They make it really simple for you to do it. You don't even have to do anything. You just need to sign your name up for a piece of paper and open your backyard, and they come in and they do the whole thing for you. And it's generally free because of their heart and the donations behind it. But I haven't done those. This is the first year I've had a decent backyard that I could actually bring children in. I was just looking it up though, and it's 5-day clubs, I think is what they call it now. And then Lifeway has a backyard VBS, if that's something, Jackie, that you were like, I want to try it, but I don't want to do a whole bunch of work for it. Those can be a way to test the waters, because Child Evangelism does have like a really good, and then they actually from the 5-day clubs, then they have this like mail in and out thing that they like communicate with those kids, and they keep in connection with helping them grow and all of that stuff. But just thought I'd let you know that that was a thing.
Do you have to do the, go ahead, Hannah.
Are you saying they send volunteers as well?
I believe so how they run it, at least in Canada, so I don't know how they're doing it in the States or if it varied in Saskatchewan where we are. They would send 2 teachers come in and they teach, because obviously this is backyard, so you're not going to have, well, ideally you're not going to have 30 children in your backyard. You might. So I don't know how they would work it with more kids, but they will send the 2 teachers to come in and do all the activities. They bring in the curriculum. I don't know about snack, that might be on the host family, but from what I've heard, it's very low energy on the behalf of the hoster. They kind of handle everything else. So
I'm going to put the link in our chat here because it's CEF is in the States too. Like I have, they call them good news clubs too. Or that might be a separate thing. I can't remember, but yeah, it's cefonline.com. I just put it in the chat. I've never used them, but we were researching them to possibly use in our public schools for the Good News Club, but it just didn't work out. Because I believe they still do that too. I don't know how it is after COVID, but they used to be able to do clubs in schools, like the after school programs, they used to be able to do that as well.
Do you know
There we
if you
go.
have, do you know if you have to be part of their doing their clubs and stuff for them to do that as part of like, like here's what you do, with our curriculum and stuff throughout the year. Here's our way to invest back in your ministry, or do you
So-
have to have some?
Sorry, I just signed up because I'm like, we live in a neighborhood with like 1 million children and they all tend up at my house anyway. So might as well someone entertain them for an hour a day that I don't have to. But my understanding is it's separate. So they do have their like different types of clubs for during the school year. The one that I have, CEF, I couldn't find it on their website here in Canada, but it's 5-day clubs as well. They may have changed it. Like it might just be a separate summer thing. I missed their supper thing that they did, but no, you can commit to just hosting that VBS. It's kind of ideal for those people maybe who like, it works for people who maybe aren't as connected to the church or who don't have that kind of, like, our church has never done one, but we've had many people in our church host them. Like, we don't use CEF materials at all, but they've been hosted by members of our church. So you wouldn't necessarily sign up per se as a church in a because you would sign up your family. So you might host the sign up sheet and being like, okay, 5 people. So Hannah, Jackie, Jody, and Tracy are all going to do this. So then you send in the information for Hannah, Jackie, Jody, and Tracy, and they commit to the weeks that they want to do. And then they send the kits.
Just looking over it right now, they do offer the 5-day club, and it's run by teenagers who've gone through training through CEF. And then the Good News Club is the one in schools. They also have online ministries, they have military children's ministry, and they also have Camp Good News. So lots of options, more than last time I've checked. But like Kristen was saying, I'm pretty sure it's free, no cost, probably more of a donation or a giving gift, whatever you call it. I'm blanking on it right now. But yeah, I've heard rave reviews about CEF. I've just never personally used them other than when I researched for a club in a public school.
Yeah, so it's only a 1 hour. So it's a 1 hour commitment. They come in and they teach it. I'm just looking what the one for Alberta and Saskatchewan says, and it's free. They don't charge because they have people who believe in it. And that's kind of their network and their ministry. So, but then there is also Lifeway, which is more of a, like you would do it from the church, that they give you the package and then your team just goes from house to house. I don't know the logistics, but
Yeah, there's some VBS curriculums that have a backyard VBS you can purchase in addition. I did not do that this year. I kind of messed up, but it was because I really loved the VBS I chose. So we had to do a lot of we created all the videos that people would share as the lesson. So like my backyard VBS families, they literally only have to run game time and crafts. Everything else is all digital. Because a lot of people get intimidated when it comes to having to teach a Bible lesson. So we make it real easy. They just either hit play on YouTube or plug in a USB and they're set to go. But there's several curriculums out there like Lifeway that have a backyard VBS option. So you don't have to do the extra work like we did. All right. On to the last few questions since we completed the book. Any new things that you learned from this book, or something you may have already known before you read this book that maybe, you feel stronger or more confident on?
I think I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, but a lot of this book served as a good encouragement to me to have the confidence to try and do some of this stuff, and talking, because she talks specifically about not needing to already have a family for parents to trust some of the wisdom that I might have. And also so many of her comparisons are things that I'm like, oh, I do know how to do that. I know how to teach. I would know how to walk. I mean, not a gym, that's a bad example, but something that I was an expert in, I would know how to walk someone through that and help them be not nervous. I know how to do that with kids. I do that with kids every week. And I have the skills that I need to do that with parents too. So that was something that I found like encouraging from this book.
I really, really loved that adopt a family at new events. I thought that was really cool. And such an interesting way to take it. So many times, you know, the new families come and they sit at the table, and you might get like one or two people who come and sit with them, depending on the size of their family and all of that stuff. And so I thought it'd be cool to have intentional families who are like, I'm willing, and not just like adopt them for that one thing, but they kind of become that like adopted family. Should they show up on Sunday? Should they? And so I really like that idea. And I'd love to hear, I mean, one of the questions I'd have for her is, how does that, like, how do you get people to sign up for that? Because you don't want to make it awkward where you've got these like weirdos hunting you down and they're like, you're mine. Everybody's creeped out and nobody comes back. But how do we intentionally create that? Like, are they more of like we volunteer to be a host or adopt a family, but we just kind of spread out and we look, and you know, if there's a family there, we make sure no one's sitting alone, or what that looks like. So that was something that was really interesting to me. And just the idea of the take it home, and how that shift is. I've tried the take it homes. I, as a parent, we have so many sheets at the bottom of our van right now that are take it home sheets that I loved the idea of, instead of being like, here's the activities, kind of being like, here's the skill we did, and providing that space for parents to allow their kids like to ask questions, and being that, to create that relationship where kids can come to mom and dad and say, I'm wondering about death. I'm wondering about this. And I don't know, I thought that was really awesome too.
Kristen, one thing we do at our church is called the celebration team. And I have adults that sign up to be the adults that love on kids. So on the last Sunday of every month, we have a celebration service where we celebrate what God is doing in children's ministry. And they ask, you know, what was the life verse for this month? What was the Bible adventure about? What was your favorite memory from church this month? What do you love? You know, what's your favorite kind of ice cream? What's your favorite color? You know, so there's spiritual questions and there's personal questions. But those adults are also the people who are, we call them our first impression team. And they are the adults that make a point to, like, they'll come back at the start of service. They're allowed to go back into our children's wing. And they will greet the kids and just let them know, hey, it's so good to see you this week. And they'll make a point to love on them after service. And then, like the book said, like, they'll compliment the parents. And so that is one of the things that, you know, it was really easy just to, you know, say, I'm looking for people in our church that are just willing to be complimentary to kids and their grown-ups. And that has been one of the best and most successful ministries in our church, because it's literally no prep. They get to, you know, be the cool people that say nice things to the kids, you know, get to say, I hope you have a good week at school this week, or how was the last day of school, or whatever's going on, how was your basketball game? And then there's just different families that just kind of gravitated towards other families that are more involved. And so we just try to make sure all of our families are covered in with a first impression team member that will just check in with them and say, you know, how was your dance recital? And then I will also, if I know something's going on and I know that, like, there's a grown-up that is the first impression member for that family, I will text them and say, hey, so, you know, Josiah had a basketball game, or Jocelyn has a dance recital next week. Those are my kids. So those are just things that, you know, that I do to try to make my church members look like the superheroes.
That is a really sweet idea. I'm trying to like process, like, what does that look like, and how do we stay on top of it? Because I think that's what our kids need so much, is that encouragement and stuff. Man, your church, Jackie, does so much stuff. How I like, just for curiosity, how many hours do you work to pull all of this off?
Well, I write all the curriculum and everything myself. And so I spend about 20 hours a week writing it and doing all of the stuff. And then, and then my pastor's wife, we have a Facebook group and we've really tried to create a culture of, like, we just want to know what your kids are doing. And so the parents like showing off their kids, And so it's been really easy for them to be like, oh, hey, this is what we have going on this week. And so that's the only way that if it's not on Facebook, I don't know. But I wasn't raised in church, so I didn't really know how church was supposed to go. And so then once I was saved, I just kind of created all this stuff on my own. And that's the only answer. It's like, I had this radical encounter with Jesus, and it's been a mission to be like, we're not going to be religious about this. We're going to give Jesus, and we're going to be Jesus, and we're going to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And we're going to make it fun and tangible and simple, and make it exciting, because even when you're old and you're in your 60s and 70s and 80s, you can still love on people.
Chapter 8 was probably one of my favorites, that we talked over about creating a multi-generational community or an intergenerational community. Truly being intentional with what we do, with who we do it with, and the how. I just felt like this chapter was just so full of a lot of great ideas, creating opportunities, creating and encouraging relationships, and that at the same time, it's not just events and things to do, but that they truly had an intentional tie to something about God, or, what am I trying to say? Like, it's not just an event, like there is something tied to it that is the gospel, or that is making it more than just a thing to do. But I really, really enjoyed chapter 8, and I'd love to hear what she's doing at her church right now to make it a multi-generational community, and how it's looking for her, especially post-COVID, because a lot of churches lost a lot of people. So how are we making that cross-generational thing happen? Because it's so important for us to get wisdom from our elderly, but at the same time keeping them young with stuff from us.
Last night I was trying to catch up because I was gone last week because I had lunch plans with a friend, and then I just didn't read the chapters. But so last night was the first time that I read the introduction to this last section. And one of the things that really struck me was that church is so far, like in that little graphic she gave with the little circles, church is on the very outside. It's the last circle. And once again, to talk about where our families are, thinking about how few of the families in my church right now have extended family, some at all. And, I have some questions I think I'm going to ask next week about how to create extended family. If church is the last circle, then there's a gap in our kids' development that they don't have they don't have the extended family. Like today I'm watching somebody because grandma and grandpa are not reliable babysitters, and there aren't any aunts and uncles that are reliable. There's no extended family. There's a mom alone, and that's not the only mom in our church that doesn't have that. And so realizing how there's, even if we're doing incredible, there's still huge gaps in that.
I think that's so important, because your church family is an important family. And it breaks my heart when I hear people feel like it's just a building they come to on Sunday. Church should be so much more, so much more. And that's why I felt COVID was so difficult, because you weren't fellowshipping with people and having conversations and relationships. It was, you and a computer screen or a TV screen. But yeah, church family is huge, and cultivating your church to do that culture. How do you do that? I somehow missed that. So I was trying to go back to my book and I found it. Any other thoughts or questions you may have for Rachel when we meet with her next week?
I loved her idea of allowing the parents to introduce topics at home before you talk about it in class. And so I'd be really interested to know, like, where she finds her balance in review versus introducing, like where, like how does she introduce that, how does she walk parents through that, what is her process in all of that? Does that make sense? Like, we're going to introduce this, but then you know, do you just kind of leave what you talked about the week before, the month before, just hanging there, or do you build on that? Do you review and introduce? What is her process, and what does she feel like is the right balance between reviewing previous information, building on previous information, and preparing for new information?
I'd wonder that too, especially with hot topics that, you know, like the school shooting that happened here in the US, because our kids are talking about it. And, you know, how do you talk to parents and, you know, let them know, I don't know, like finding, how do you share that, or how do you talk about that, and how do you help parents with those conversations too?
For next week, do you want us to send like any questions that we have to you? Like, are you going to be doing most of the questions?
Yeah, no, in the past, I've gone through past videos and wrote down the questions, but if you can type up maybe the few you had or whatever, I can send it to her ahead of time. That way she's kind of prepared on how to answer them. That would be great.
Okay. All right. I have some questions, but I haven't thought through exactly how I want to organize them. So if I could get a chance to send them to you in a little bit, that'd be good.
Yeah, I just say send it to me by Sunday. That way gives her, you know, a day or so to look over. She is in England, I believe it is. So they are 5 hours ahead of me, Eastern Standard Time. So when she meets with us, it's going to be like evening time there. So I'm glad that worked out. But if anybody doesn't have any other questions or thoughts, we can just kind of wrap up here in prayer and be done for the day until next Tuesday. Does that sound good? All right, I'm going to go ahead and pray, and then we'll be done for today. Father God, creator of heaven and earth, Lord, you know all things, and you have given these amazing ladies gifts that they are using for your work, your will, and your way. God, I pray that we have all kind of taken something from this book, Lord, and that we can put it into action and support our parents and help them disciple their children into these amazing believers who are so confident in your word, Lord, that they just stand their ground no matter what they're experiencing, Lord, that they have faith that can move mountains. And God, I pray that our parents feel this confidence as well. Lord, you are an amazing God who has done so much for us, Lord, and we thank you so much for your blessings in all of our different ministries and our churches. And God, I pray that as our leaders are preparing for Sunday, Lord, that you will give them clear thoughts and clear minds and hearts, Lord, to be willing to be these vessels to share your truth and your word to our families. We thank you for Rachel, Lord, and writing this book. And we just ask that you give us a good meeting next week as we talk with her and learn more things. God, we love you and we thank you for your mercy and your grace. Be with us as we end here today. In your name we pray. Amen.